Hello, Michelle again, and today we're going to continue talking about historic ceramics. And the first thing we're going to talk about is maker's marks. And so a maker's mark is a stamp, essentially, that tells you who made the piece of pottery you're looking at. And so typically that's going to be on the base of a historic ceramic, so the bottom of a plate or the bottom of a bowl, bottom of a cup, whatever. And so we talked last week about these feet rings on the bottom, and in prehistoric pottery, we typically don't get super excited if we find the base of something because it doesn't usually tell us a whole lot. But in historic archaeology, finding the base of a piece of pottery is actually pretty good because that's where you find these maker's marks. And so I'm gonna put a picture of this in the comments because I don't think it'll focus very well. But this is one. And if you can see it or if you look in the comments, it's kind of some kind of little like bowl or pot or something, and then underneath it, it says Knowles. And more of that is broken, so there were more words, but if you know what you're looking for and you have the right resources, you can figure out what company made this, probably when they made it. And much like branding today, these maker's marks sometimes change slightly through time. So in some instances, we have catalogs or information that say like this is what it looked like at these years, and then it changed slightly to this. And looking up the name of the company, you can find out where they were producing their ceramics, what years they were producing those ceramics, sometimes where their distribution was, things like that. And so maker's marks are really cool because they can really narrow down time frames of when things were being produced. And then it can always be interesting to see when they were produced versus when they were in use at the archaeological site that we find them at. Maybe they are something that was passed down from generation to generation, or maybe there's something that a family just got brand new, shipped in from England or something like that. So that's a kind of cool thing that you can tell with maker's marks. And then the other thing I want to talk about today is the decoration on the pottery. And we have limited pottery styles here because we had a limited historic occupation on this site. But there's a couple of different ways that pottery is decorated, or historic ceramic was decorated. And the first is that it was hand painted. So literally a paintbrush and paint, and you would usually around the rim of a piece, around the edges of a plate. That's still how we decorate pottery today. And sometimes on the flat surface of a plate as well. But often, kind of typically, we're looking at the edges. And so sometimes in that hand-painted stuff, you can see the brush strokes and you can see the evidence that it was hand done with a paintbrush. And then in 1750 or so, right around there, in England, they developed this thing called transfer printing. And that meant they would take a copper or steel plate and engrave it, and then essentially stamp that image onto all different kinds of pottery. So usually this is called monochrome, which means one color, and usually that is blue. And I guess that's because blue was a good color to use, that when fired, it kept its color. But it's not strictly blue. There were other colors. And it's not strictly monochromatic either. There can be multicolor prints, but usually that means the outside edges are one color and then the inside stamp is a different color. It would be pretty difficult in the early parts of this process in the 1750s, 1800s to get individual colors on individual little pieces of a picture that's being stamped. And so I've got some pieces that have that kind of decoration on there. And you can see it's kind of an intricate decoration. And if you look really close, sometimes you can see little individual dots of color that kind of give away that it's a transfer print as well. You can see on this one. It's an intricate design, but it would have been printed on there rather than hand painted. And then the next thing that often comes up is called shell edge. And I don't have any examples of that here, but I do have a link that I'm going to leave in the comments to a cool historic archaeology guide that was put out by Millersville University. And inside of there, they have some really great pictures. I just have a black and white copy here. But some really nice pictures and descriptions of different pottery, historic, ceramic, decorative styles, and kind of what to look for to identify those things. And then one more thing I wanted to mention to kind of pull historic ceramics all together is that historic ceramics were not just used for food. Ceramics could be made into a lot of things, and one of the sometimes sort of creepy things that we find are pieces of dolls. And so you would have maybe a body of a doll that was soft, but then sewed to that doll would be like legs and arms, and we find those made of ceramic. And I'm not sure that that's what this piece is, but it is a weird little curvy piece. You can see that it was hollow. But this is definitely not part of any kind of dinnerware set or anything like that. So I think that this was some kind of doll or some kind of other toy. And then I also have this tiny little handle. And I think that this might have been from like a toy tea set. Because it's really, first I thought, well, maybe it's just a actual teacup handle. But I think it's much too small to have been functional in a real dining set. So I think it might be part of a child's toy tea set. And so we find toys historically, we find, like we've been talking about, dinnerware and food storage wares, but anything that we use ceramics and pottery for now, you could have used it historically as well. So we find a whole variety of things, but the main thing and the things that we can really get good dates on and things are dinnerware and food service vessels, but the other things are interesting as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea, and do check out those links and pictures in the comments, because I think that is a better idea of what I'm talking about. So hope you enjoy it, and I will see you next week. Bye.